Hello everyone, there comes a point in life where being nice is no longer noble, it's destructive. You bend so others don't break. You smile to avoid tension. You say yes when your soul is screaming no. But here's the truth, that kind of niceness is just silent suffering. It's not your job to be liked. It's not your duty to make everyone happy. It's your responsibility to be real with others, and especially with yourself. Every time you choose others over your peace, you're teaching the world how to treat you. And if you don't respect yourself enough to say enough, they won't either. This is your wake-up call to stop being the nice person who gets overlooked, overworked, and undervalued. Choose to be kind with boundaries, generous with limits, and loving without losing yourself. You weren't born to live in fear of judgment. You were born to lead your life boldly, authentically, and fiercely. It's time to stop playing small. It's time to stop being the nice person and start being the real one. There's a major difference between being nice and being truly kind, and understanding this difference can change your life. Niceness is often rooted in fear, fear of rejection, fear of confrontation, fear of disappointing others. It comes from a place of needing external approval, which means your actions are not always genuine, and they're strategic. You're being nice, not because it's the right thing, but because it feels safer. Kindness, on the other hand, comes from a position of strength and clarity. A kind person is honest, even when it's uncomfortable. A kind person has compassion, but also self-respect. Kindness allows for truth. Niceness avoids it. The nice person will bite their tongue just to keep the peace. The kind person will speak up not to create conflict, but to prevent long-term damage to themselves and others. Niceness prioritizes being liked. Kindness prioritizes being real. We're raised in a culture that rewards niceness on the surface. You're told to be agreeable, smile even when you're not okay, and never rock the boat. But what they don't tell you is this: being overly nice often leaves you empty. You give so much of yourself, you end up with nothing left. It leads to resentment, exhaustion, and an aching sense that your needs never matter. Being kind does not mean being passive. It means treating others with respect, but also expecting the same in return. It means helping when you choose to, not when you're guilted to. It means being firm without being cruel, and soft without being submissive. When you stop chasing nice and start living with intentional kindness, that's when you regain control. That's when you begin honoring your truth. That's when people finally see the real you, and you see your worth. People pleasing is often mistaken for being considerate, generous, or thoughtful, but in reality, it's a silent form of self-abandonment. Every time you put someone else's comfort above your own needs, especially when it hurts you, you are sending yourself a message. You don't matter as much. It starts subtly. You agree to things you don't want to do. You laugh at jokes that sting. You tolerate disrespect in the name of keeping things smooth. You say yes when every fiber in your body is begging you to say no. And with each moment of quiet submission, you chip away at your identity, your values, and your emotional boundaries. The worst part, people pleasers are often praised for being so nice, easygoing, or selfless, but under the surface, there's a constant emotional tug-of-war. You become drained, resentful, anxious, and invisible, not because others don't see you, but because you've made yourself disappear in the name of harmony. You become addicted to being accepted, even if that means betraying your truth. You fear rejection so much that you trade your authenticity for temporary approval, but no relationship, not family, friendship, or love, should require you to silence your needs, ignore your instincts, or endure things that hurt you. And here's what makes people pleasing so dangerous. It's not always about kindness. Sometimes it's about survival. It comes from a childhood where love was conditional, or where being good meant avoiding punishment. But you're not that helpless child anymore. You have the right to take up space, to disagree, to say, I matter too. People pleasing isn't compassion, it's control. You try to control how others see you, how they feel about you, and how peaceful things appear on the surface. But you're not responsible for everyone's emotions. You are responsible for honoring your own. Respect is one of the most valuable forms of currency in any relationship, personal, professional, or social. Yet far too often, people believe that they can earn respect by constantly sacrificing themselves, giving in, and never creating tension. They think that by being endlessly available, by over-delivering, or by tolerating behavior that makes them uncomfortable, they'll eventually be valued. But that's not how respect works. Respect doesn't grow in the shadow of self-erasure. It isn't born from silence, nor does it thrive in environments where one person constantly gives while the other constantly takes. In fact, the more you give up your own voice to accommodate others, the less likely they are to view you as someone who commands respect. Why? Because you've shown them that you will accept less, and people treat you at the level you allow. When you consistently put someone else on a pedestal and place yourself beneath them emotionally, mentally, or even physically, you teach them that you're willing to be less than equal. That may keep the peace temporarily, but in the long run, it teaches them to expect your sacrifice as a standard, not as a favor. Many people who are nice or selfless believe they're building strong relationships by giving more than they receive. But one-sided effort doesn't create closeness, it creates imbalance. And eventually, imbalance turns into entitlement. People begin to believe they deserve your time, your energy, your forgiveness, no matter how they treat you. And without even realizing it, you've taught them to see you as someone who's always available, always agreeable, always willing to put themselves last. Real respect comes from being clear about your limits. It comes from standing your ground even when it's hard, from expressing your truth without apology, and from being firm enough to walk away when your value isn't recognized. Sacrifice without recognition doesn't breed respect, it breeds resentment, both in yourself and in others. You don't become respected by always being the one who adjusts, who lowers the volume of their voice, or who takes the blame just to keep others comfortable. You become respected when you live in alignment with your worth, when you stop begging for a seat at the table and instead bring your own chair. There's a misconception that setting boundaries is mean, cold, or selfish. That saying no is somehow an attack, but the truth is, boundaries are not acts of aggression, they are acts of self-respect. They're not walls to keep people out, they're gates that protect what matters within. And anyone who truly values you will not only understand your boundaries, they will appreciate them. Boundaries are not just about keeping toxic people away. They are about maintaining balance, clarity, and peace in your daily life. When you constantly stretch yourself beyond what feels right emotionally, mentally, or physically just to avoid disappointing others, you are violating your own integrity. That's not love, that's self-abandonment in disguise. Saying no doesn't mean you're shutting someone out. It means you're honoring your own capacity. It means you understand that your time, your energy, and your presence are limited, and that you're not willing to exhaust yourself for the sake of keeping others happy. That is not rude, that is responsible, that is maturity. Too often, people think being nice means being endlessly available. They assume that in order to be loved or accepted, they have to agree with everything, show up for everyone, and tolerate anything. But when you lack boundaries, you become a magnet for those who seek to use, drain, or disrespect you, not always intentionally, but because you've never shown them where the line is. Boundaries teach others how to treat you. If you don't set them, people will push as far as you allow, and if you allow everything, expect to receive nothing in return, not gratitude, not kindness, and definitely not respect. People won't value what you offer if it seems like you don't value yourself enough to protect it. You don't need to explain, defend, or apologize for your limits. You are not required to justify why you can't always answer the phone, attend every event, or fix someone else's chaos. You're allowed to prioritize rest over obligation, peace over pressure, and healing over hustle. Boundaries are not about changing other people, they are about changing what you will accept. They are not punishments, they are protections. They don't push people away. They simply filter out the ones who only want access to you on their terms. One of the most deeply ingrained habits of people who have been conditioned to be nice is the constant need to apologize, not just for mistakes, but for their existence, their presence, their needs, and even their successes. They apologize when they speak too long, when they speak too loudly, when they ask for help, or even when they dare to express disagreement. But let this be clear, you were never meant to shrink yourself just to make others comfortable. Taking up space doesn't mean being arrogant or self-centered. It means existing fully. It means allowing yourself to speak, move, express, and live without constantly scanning the room for approval. It's about giving yourself permission to be seen, to be heard, and to matter without guilt. When you spend your life walking on eggshells, filtering your voice, and dulling your brightness just to fit in or avoid criticism, you are not being humble, you are hiding. And hiding is a slow kind of death. You fade into the background of your own life, always playing supporting roles in stories where you should be the lead. You don't owe the world an apology for having opinions. You don't need to say sorry for having boundaries, emotions, or ambitions that don't fit neatly into someone else's expectations. The right people won't shame you for standing tall. They'll cheer for you. But they can't celebrate someone who's too afraid to show up as they are. Every time you apologize for being you, you give a little piece of your power away. You unconsciously reinforce the idea that your presence is a burden or your needs are too much. And over time, you begin to believe it yourself. That inner voice that once whispered, "Maybe I shouldn't say this," becomes a constant scream of "I'm not enough." But you are not too much. You are not a problem to be managed. You are a person to be honored by others, yes, but most importantly by yourself. Taking up space also means embracing your strengths without downplaying them. It means sharing your ideas, your passion, your creativity, without shrinking into the shadows just because someone else might feel threatened. It means living your truth even when others don't understand it. It means standing confidently in rooms where you used to feel small. There is no prize for disappearing quietly. There is no medal for making yourself smaller so others feel big. Your presence is not a disruption, it is a declaration that you are here, that you are worthy, and that you no longer need permission to exist in full. Being nice might sound like a virtue, and in many situations it is. But there's a hidden danger when niceness becomes a default mode, especially when it's driven by fear, guilt, or the constant desire to be accepted. When your instinct is to always be agreeable, always avoid conflict, always say yes, and always be available, you unknowingly make yourself vulnerable to manipulation. Manipulative people aren't always malicious on the surface. In fact, many of them are charming, charismatic, and skilled at reading emotional cues. And one of the first things they notice is whether someone is too nice, because to them, too nice often means easy to influence, unlikely to say no, afraid of confrontation, and eager to please. That becomes their green light to push boundaries. They test your limits slowly, a small favor here, a dismissive comment there, an emotional guilt trip that makes you question whether you're being selfish for prioritizing your needs. And because you're conditioned to be the peacekeeper, you tolerate it. You convince yourself they didn't mean harm, or that it's your job to be understanding. But over time, this pattern drains you, distorts your reality, and traps you in one-sided dynamics. Niceness without discernment becomes a weakness, not because kindness is weak, but because unchecked kindness lacks protection. You must understand that not everyone who smiles at you has good intentions. Some people only stick around because your niceness serves their convenience. Manipulators thrive when you doubt yourself, when you hesitate to express anger, when you believe that setting boundaries will make you look mean. And they will twist your words, your emotions, even your sense of fairness to keep control. Suddenly, you find yourself over-explaining, over-apologizing, and over-giving not because you want to, but because you feel like you have to in order to keep the peace or maintain the connection. This is not how healthy relationships operate. In genuine connections, kindness is mutual, not exploited. Respect is balanced, not one-sided. If someone takes your generosity and uses it as leverage, that is not a reflection of your goodness, it's a reflection of their character. Being kind doesn't mean you allow yourself to be used. Being understanding doesn't mean you accept mistreatment. And being loving doesn't mean you ignore manipulation. Real strength lies in the ability to be both kind and clear in recognizing when someone is taking advantage and refusing to play along. One of the most damaging habits that nice people develop over time is the silencing of their own voice, not because they have nothing to say, but because they believe saying it might upset someone, spark disagreement, or make them seem difficult. So instead of speaking up, they stay quiet. Instead of expressing how they feel, they swallow their emotions. And over time, their voice, once strong, full of insight, personality, and truth, becomes a whisper even they can barely hear. But here's the truth. Your voice is not just a sound, it's your power. It's how you assert your identity, set boundaries, share ideas, process emotions, and participate in the world. And when you suppress it to keep others comfortable, you're not being nice, you're being invisible. Your silence doesn't protect peace. It protects dysfunction. It allows others to speak over you, decide for you, and sometimes even mistreat you because they've learned that you won't challenge them. They assume your quietness means agreement, your tolerance means approval, and your hesitation means consent. But deep down, you're not okay. You're just afraid to say it out loud. Somewhere along the line, you may have learned that it's safer to stay agreeable than to speak your truth. Maybe you were taught that disagreeing is rude, that asserting yourself is disrespectful, or that standing up for your needs is selfish, but none of those things are true. Using your voice doesn't make you unkind, it makes you real. Speaking up doesn't have to be loud or aggressive. It simply has to be honest. You can express your needs calmly. You can share your perspective without shame. You can say that hurt me, or I disagree, or this isn't okay, and still be a good person. In fact, the more you use your voice with clarity and integrity, the more people will begin to see and treat you with the respect you deserve. Not using your voice is a betrayal of self. Every time you silence yourself to avoid conflict, you're teaching yourself that your comfort matters less than someone else's ego, that your needs are secondary, that your truth isn't worth the risk of discomfort. And if you keep doing that long enough, you'll start to believe it. But you were not created to live in the background. You were not meant to be a silent bystander in your own life. Your thoughts, your feelings, your boundaries, they matter. You don't need to raise your voice to be heard. You just need to own it. Kindness is a beautiful quality. It's one of the most powerful forces for connection, healing, and humanity. But kindness without limits, without structure, without self-protection, becomes dangerous. It becomes a breeding ground for burnout, for bitterness, for emotional exhaustion. Why? Because giving endlessly without boundaries doesn't make you noble, it makes you empty. There's a difference between helping and being used, between being supportive and being exploited. And if you don't draw the line, no one else will draw it for you. So many people wear kindness like armor, believing that if they're always generous, patient, and giving, the world will treat them well in return. But the harsh reality is this: some people will take everything you offer and still ask for more, not because you're kind, but because you've made it easy. When you give and give without receiving, without rest, without recognition, without any balance, you begin to feel invisible. You start questioning your own worth. You start resenting the very people you once wanted to help. And most dangerously, you start disconnecting from yourself. You become tired in your bones, not just from doing too much, but from doing too much for everyone except yourself. Kindness is not supposed to cost you your sanity. It is not supposed to leave you drained at the end of every day, feeling like your energy, your time, and your emotional bandwidth belong to everyone but you. If your kindness requires you to constantly suppress your needs, neglect your well-being, and tolerate disrespect, then it's not kindness anymore, it's a coping mechanism rooted in fear and unworthiness. You're not supposed to carry everyone else's problems on your back. You're not responsible for healing everyone's wounds. You can care deeply about people and still say, I can't be everything to everyone. That's not weakness, it's wisdom. The world doesn't need you to be a martyr. It needs you to be whole. And being whole means protecting your energy, honoring your time, and choosing when and how to give not out of guilt, but out of genuine desire. True kindness isn't self-destructive, it's rooted in balance. It knows when to extend a hand and when to step back. It knows that compassion toward others must never come at the expense of compassion toward yourself. Because when you continue to pour from an empty cup, eventually, there's nothing left. And kindness that depletes you isn't sustainable, it becomes a burden you carry instead of a gift you give. Many people who fall into the nice person trap carry an invisible weight, the belief that it's their job to fix everything and everyone, that if someone is hurting, it's their duty to help. If someone is angry, they must calm them. If there's tension in the room, they feel responsible for smoothing it out. This mindset might come from a compassionate heart, but it's a dangerous pattern that leads to emotional exhaustion, codependency, and constant guilt. You are not a repair service for broken people. You are not a peace negotiator in every conflict. You are not the emotional caretaker for everyone around you. And yet, you may have been conditioned, whether by family, culture, or past relationships, to believe that your worth is directly tied to how much you can tolerate, fix, or heal in others. So what happens? You overextend, you insert yourself into problems that aren't yours, you offer solutions even when no one asked, you absorb other people's pain, anger, or dysfunction, thinking that if you don't, the situation will spiral. You think you're being loving, but what you're really doing is overcompensating, often at the cost of your own peace. And here's the painful truth. Some people will let you carry the burden as long as you're willing. They will let you do all the emotional labor. They will rely on your endless forgiveness, your quick apologies, your ability to make things right, not because they respect you, but because it's convenient for them not to take responsibility for themselves. You cannot rescue people who refuse to change. You cannot be the solution to every problem. And when you try to be, you end up enabling dysfunction instead of encouraging growth. In trying to be the fixer, you unintentionally rob people of their own journey, their chance to face consequences, learn lessons, and build their own strength. Letting go of this role doesn't make you uncaring. It makes you healthy. It doesn't mean you stop loving people. It means you stop sacrificing yourself for people who are unwilling to meet you halfway. It means you finally understand that true compassion has boundaries and that saving everyone else isn't your purpose. You were never meant to be the glue holding everything together. You're allowed to step back. You're allowed to say, "This isn't mine to carry." You're allowed to let people figure things out on their own, even if it means they struggle. That's not abandonment, that's respect for their autonomy and yours. Seeking approval is one of the most subtle and seductive traps that the nice person falls into. It starts with wanting to be liked, a natural human desire, but it quickly snowballs into something deeper and more dangerous, an emotional dependency on external validation. You begin to measure your worth by how others see you. You tailor your behavior, your words, even your identity to please people who may never truly see or value the real you. It feels good, of course, to be praised, to be told you're doing great, that you're a good person. Compliments feel like fuel, recognition becomes your reward, and every time someone approves of you, it momentarily soothes that inner doubt, the fear that you're not enough unless someone says so. But that high never lasts. The more you chase approval, the more approval you need. It becomes a cycle, a craving, and like any addiction, it demands more and more of your soul in return for less and less peace. And here's the catch. No matter how much you try to please others, you'll never satisfy everyone. There will always be someone who misunderstands you, judges you, or wants more than you can give. So you bend, you compromise. You reshape your edges to fit the molds they hand you, only to realize that no matter how much of yourself you give up, it's still not enough for someone who doesn't want the real you. In chasing approval, you become a version of yourself that feels safe, non-threatening, agreeable. But with each performance, each forced smile, each silent yes, that should have been a no, you drift further from your true identity. And even when the applause comes, it doesn't feel real because it's not you they're clapping for. It's the image you presented, the mask you wore, the cost of approval. Seeking is authenticity, it's self-betrayal in exchange for fleeting acceptance. And the deeper the need for validation runs, the harder it becomes to trust your own voice, your own values, your own worth without someone else confirming it. But here's the truth. Approval that must be earned through performance is never secure. The same people who praise you today may turn on you tomorrow the moment you stop doing what they expect. You cannot build your identity on shifting sand. You cannot let your happiness rest in the hands of people who don't even know the battles you fought just to be here. The freedom you seek doesn't come from being liked, it comes from being aligned. Aligned with your truth, aligned with your values, aligned with your highest self, regardless of who claps or who walks away. Because when you finally stop chasing approval and start choosing yourself, you no longer need the world's permission to be at peace. There is a profound turning point in every person's life, a moment of clarity, of inner awakening, when they realize that waiting for others to choose them, validate them, or prioritize them is a losing game. That moment is the birthplace of transformation. It's where healing begins, and it all starts when you finally decide to choose yourself. Choosing yourself doesn't mean you stop caring about others. It doesn't mean you become selfish or cold-hearted. It means you begin to honor your own needs with the same energy and consistency you've spent pouring into everyone else. It means you stop waiting for someone to give you permission to live, to speak, to grow, to be seen. You give yourself the permission. For too long, you may have lived as a secondary character in your own story, prioritizing everyone else's comfort, silencing your own dreams, and trying to earn love by shrinking into the most likable version of yourself. You tried to be what they wanted, the dependable one, the forgiving one, the one who never complains, but the truth is that version of you was built on survival, not self-love. It was built on fear of rejection, fear of abandonment, fear of not being enough. When you choose yourself, that fear starts to dissolve. You begin to realize that the people who truly love you won't need you to become less to keep them. You stop chasing what you were never meant to hold on to. You start recognizing that your time, your energy, your presence, they are valuable, and not everyone deserves access to them. Choosing yourself is not a one-time event. It's a daily decision. It's walking away from situations that drain you, even when they're familiar. It's standing up for yourself in rooms where your voice was once ignored. It's saying I'm no longer available for relationships that require me to betray myself in order to belong. This choice is not always easy. It can be lonely. It can be painful. People might call you selfish. They might not understand. That's okay. Choosing yourself is not about proving anything to anyone else. It's about finally showing yourself that you are worthy of your own loyalty. When you make that shift, when you stop abandoning yourself to be accepted and start accepting yourself whether or not others do, everything changes. Your confidence grows, your relationships evolve, your standards rise, and most importantly, your peace returns, because real transformation doesn't begin when someone else decides you're worth it. It begins the moment you decide that you are. When you no longer seek to be saved because you realize you were the one you needed all along. So now you stand at a crossroads between the version of you that was shaped by fear, guilt, and the need for approval, and the version of you that is ready to rise in truth, in strength, and in self-respect. The world doesn't need another person who lives quietly in the shadows just to be liked. The world needs you whole, unfiltered, courageous. You don't need to apologize for your boundaries. You don't need to fix everyone's chaos. You don't need to be agreeable at the cost of your peace. You have the right to take up space, to say no, to walk away, to speak up, to stand tall and still be kind. Still be worthy, still be loved. It's not your job to be the nice person anymore. That role served a version of you that didn't know better, but now you do. Now you know that kindness without boundaries is self-destruction, that silence isn't peace, and that shrinking won't save you, it will only erase you. This is your call to step into your power, to stop waiting for the world to choose you and start choosing yourself. Not because you're perfect, but because you're finally done sacrificing your truth just to be tolerated. You were not made to live small. You were made to live true.